There we go. So good morning again, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Incorporate Storytelling in Your Work, Part 2. My name is Tamaya Memley, and I'm with the New York State Parenting Education Partnership. We're really excited to have the opportunity to partner with Karen Sweeney and Lisa Gladio and host this webinar. But before I hand the mic over to Lisa, I've got a couple of housekeeping items to cover. So as I just said, a recording of today's webinar will be available on our website at nicepep.org. It will be available early next week. We encourage you to share the link with all of the folks in your network. We'd love to spread the word. We'd also love to hear from you during today's presentation. And while all attendees are going to be muted during the actual presentation, I'll be watching the chat box for any questions that you might have. We are going to save questions for the end of today's webinar, but I'll be watching and recording those and sharing your questions with both Karen and Lisa at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Lisa and Karen. And Lisa, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Great, thank you. I am going to share my screen now and put up a PowerPoint presentation. As Tamaya said, I'm Lisa Gladio, and I'm with Prevent Child Abuse New York as well, and I'm part of the Healthy Families New York training and staff development team. And with us today, we have Karen Sweeney. She can give a wave so we can see who she is. And she's with NISPEP, and she's a senior parenting educator. And why we got together today was there was such a great response to the storytelling webinar that occurred in November. We wanted to follow up on that and talk further about what we do as people working with parents when we hear those emotional stories from people. What do we do next? What are the next steps? I wanted to acknowledge, this came up in the last webinar, that sometimes storytelling has a negative connotation. Sometimes people think of storytelling as lying or telling tales. And when we use it here in this webinar, we're just going to continue to use it to keep some consistency going. And we just mean allowing parents or people an opportunity to share their experiences and feelings with us being a safe place where they can share that. So that's what we mean by storytelling, is just finding out what people's experiences and feelings have been in the past. So the first couple things we're going to do are just really a recap from the first webinar, and that is, why is storytelling important, and how we encourage storytelling, how we get people to open up a little bit and share their experiences with us. And then, as I said, since I'm with the Healthy Families program, I'm going to be talking about what some of the things we can do with that information from a home visitor point of view. And Karen is going to be sharing what the next steps are as far as a group facilitator viewpoint would be. Then we're going to have a bit of a breakout activity where people can get together in smaller groups and share some of their strategies. Then we'll come back together and share those and see what questions there are and wrap up the day. So the first thing, again, is just recapping, why is storytelling important? And I had heard this quote years ago, and it always stuck with me. When people feel heard, they can begin to heal. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to provide a platform where people can share their stories with us, and we can be that safe, neutral place where we can receive their information and they can feel understood. So very simply, the first thing is just that by listening and hearing somebody's story as a home visitor or a group facilitator, we're just getting to know that parent better. And when we get to know the parent better, we can understand them better. We can understand some of their choices a little bit better. We can start building those commonalities and connections. And in turn, that leads to our relationship building. We start to establish that trust between each other, and parents can feel that they're important when we take the time to listen to them, and that's very important. It helps them feel heard. As we said, that encourages their healing. Once somebody's not taking that energy to hold their story in, they can it's out in the open, and they can think about maybe starting to address some things. So it encourages healing. By listening to people's stories, it helps us to be culturally humble. That's very important. We don't want to make assumptions about anybody. We don't want to assume we think we know what's going on with them. By listening to people's stories, we are remaining in a curious place. So we're learning and taking in information, and we're not making assumptions. And then what's very important in our work is encouraging people to share their stories, and listening is part of a trauma informed approach. And we know that being trauma informed means that we understand that people's past experiences impact their current behaviors. So we're taking the time to listen to that so we can understand those connections better. We're understanding that people are reacting the way they do now because of things that have happened in their past, and we're learning what those past experiences are. There's a book that just came out recently that a lot of us are excited about. It's by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry, called What Happened to You. And that's exactly what being trauma informed is asking people what happened to them rather than what's wrong with you. So listening to people's stories and allowing them to share with us is really being trauma informed. And when we take the time to listen to people's stories, we're kind of calming them down a little bit. They're not coming from as stressed of a place. And when people are calmer and they feel understood and heard, then they're in a much better position to understand the information that we're there to present them with in the first place, either in a group or in a home visiting situation. We have an agenda and information we want to share with them. And by giving them time to tell their story and showing that they're important to us and we want to understand them, that kind of calms their brain a little bit so they can be more open to that information that we eventually want to get out to them. So next, Karen is going to talk about some of the ways we can encourage storytelling.
Thank you, Lisa. That was a great introduction. And some of the things that I took away from that is that, it's so important to create a safe environment for them to be able to share. And, I always say that listening is probably our most powerful tool, is to just listen and be present in the moment with people. So starting off with, what we want to talk about here is that staying curious. And that is about asking questions, wondering, never assuming that you know or understand even where they're coming from. So you want to be an active listener. That means, eye contact, the nodding of the head. Oftentimes I'll have that question kind of look on my face, and I use silence and, just digesting the information that they've just shared, and truly wanting to understand what it is that they are saying. And I think that that's what's kept me in this field for 30 plus years, is that I am curious. I really want to know and get to know them, and why they've made the decisions that they've made. So usually what happens is that when I am in that curious stage and I'm wondering, is that others in the class will then step in and explain what it is that person is trying to relay. So there's those connections that are made pretty quickly when one person is explaining their story and their situation. Then those connections are made around the room. And I love that, because then you're really creating some connections that will oftentimes last beyond the classroom, in the group time that they are together. So, validating and respecting each other is what happens when you're staying curious and wanting to know more about them. And a quote that I came across is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So again, it's, when you can establish that sense of curiosity and truly wanting to know what it is that's going on in their life. And we get feedback. We ask for feedback in all of our classes. And one of the most powerful things that I've taken away from many responses is that it is the first time that they've actually been listened to and validated in the class in any kind of situation. And so that certainly is what you want to be able to establish, is them feeling validated. Another thing that we want to do is use open-ended questions. So an open-ended question will engage the person in decision-making and problem solving. So it's not a yes or no question, but it's asking and wanting some clarification. Like an example would be, how does that make you feel? We've used that. I mean, in the helping field, that's a very typical question that we would ask. Another question would be, when can you remember that happening to you? So what you're doing is you're soliciting more information. A quick way of changing a closed question to an open-ended question is just by putting a what, a when, a where, who, how in front of that, the question, so that they can further elaborate and explain what it is that's going on in their life. So you would use an open-ended question when you're seeking information, when you're wanting feedback, when you want them to explain something, asking for their thoughts on something that you are wanting them to do some self-reflection on. The next thing is limit self-disclosure. Now, I think it's very important, and at the beginning of a class, I'll have parents introduce themselves and ask the ages of their children. Now, in my introduction, I do the exact same thing. I share with them the number of children that I have, the ages that they are. I'll give them information about a pet, how many years I've been married. So it just gives them a little bit of a glimpse so that they know that I'm part of it. I'm part of the group. Trust building is ongoing, but remember that it's about them and it's not about you. I've been in groups before where the facilitator will start to talk a lot about their own situation. Now, I do believe in sprinkling in some personal experiences when it is appropriate, because I want them to know that I've also had some struggles in my child rearing years, and that, I'm not perfect and that we all have struggles, but keep that sharing to a minimum. And do not go on, keep that your storytelling short, because if you're going on and on and on, oftentimes what happens is that a person will quickly disengage, because they want it to be about them and not about you. So we want to provide them with hope and encouragement in their parenting journey. The next thing is reflective listening. So there's a loop that actually, I teach parents about this and how to do reflective listening. So the loop is looking at the person who's speaking. So you're establishing eye contact. You pay attention to what the other person is saying and try to think about what it is that they're saying. Listen without interrupting. Again, not, trying to say, oh yeah, I know I've experienced that before. Allow them to have that space and that time. Try to understand the other person's feeling and the point of view. Watch the person's body language. That is 85% of their communication is through body language. So it's really, really important for you to pay attention to that. And by doing, you have to be silent yourself and giving eye contact and looking at the person and really seeing where they're at and what's going on just by their physical being. Ask questions if you don't understand. So then again, that's that open-ended questions. And then repeat in your own words what you think that person is saying, which is paraphrasing. So there is some clarification that they've explained themselves well. And if they haven't, that's their time to be able to correct you because you haven't understood what it is that they're saying. The next one is validate feelings. So practice naming and validating. One of the things that I think that we're really, really lousy at is identifying and naming a broad range of feelings. We have very limited emotional vocabulary. It is, we're mad, we're glad, we're happy, we're sad. There is a huge number of feelings. And what I tell parents is that, get comfortable with naming their feelings and that all feelings are okay. All feelings are okay. You can be mad, you can be upset about things. What is the problem with all of us is that what we do with that feeling can cause some problems and cause some distance in our relationship with other people. So we want to respond to what we see with empathy. So an example would be, I see that you're angry. It looks like you're having a tough time right now. I hear what you're saying. Just by saying those brief statements at the very beginning and not jumping in and trying to solve the problem or tell them what they should be doing, but just to name the feeling that you are seeing they are experiencing. And if you're not right, then again, they'll correct you. So what I do with that after I've made and validated that feeling is that I will provide some silence or I'll follow it up with an open-ended question. So just allowing the feeling, again, what I said before about classes that I've done is that oftentimes they feel run over, I guess is the only way I can explain it. And they're not really being validated in the moment. And we can really de-escalate a situation just by saying, I see that you're having a tough time with this. And then that oftentimes will open up. And then you can move through and say, setting some limits if that's what needs to happen as far as how they're behaving as a result of their feelings. And then asking them, what are some things that they could do to possibly improve the situation? So you move them into some problem solving. But validating their feelings is very, very powerful and will help to de-escalate the situation.
Great. Thank you, Karen. So that really sets the tone. That's the most immediate thing you can do is validate somebody's feelings when they are sharing these emotional stories with you. And also, it's so important what Karen said about not jumping in to fix things, just being present to hear their story, but remaining in your role. And that's our first point of now what do we do is the importance of keeping a healthy boundary, because sometimes we hear some stories and they just bring out a strong response in us and we want to jump in and fix things or tell people what to do. So the very first thing we have to do is remain in our role, because our role is to support the parent. It's not to fix the problem or fix the parent or to take the challenges on ourselves. So healthy boundaries are for ourselves as home visitors or group facilitators, as well as for the parents. They keep us both safe. We want to be able to support people, and if we are burnt out or doing too much or crossing those boundaries, we're not going to be in a place where we can be the best support. And if we are not using healthy boundaries, it's confusing for the families. It's confusing for parents if we're not predictable and we're not consistent. And we need to be predictable and consistent so they can see us as that safe place to process things with and share their stories and to trust our information. So that's why it's so important that we keep these healthy boundaries. And from the home visitor perspective, that can be very difficult because we're going right into people's homes. You know, that can be kind of comfortable. Um, and we're doing it over a long period of time sometimes. I know everybody's program's different, but with the Healthy Families program, we can work with a family for up to 5 years. So that relationship can start to feel very comfortable. And that means we have to even work harder at keeping those healthy boundaries because we don't want to slide into something that we shouldn't. Um, and we want to remember that if people are sharing their stories and they're very stressful, and they may have some traumatic components to them, the ways that we interact with families and some of our strategies are therapeutic, but we are not therapists. And we need to remember that sometimes we're just there to support them, listen to them, help them process things by answering those open ended questions. But we are not the ones to fix things or help people through their mental health journey. We're there to support them in getting maybe more appropriate help. So that goes into identifying supports for the parents and possibly making some referrals. Now, it could be some more serious referrals like mental health services, or it may just be that by telling their story, the family has identified some changes they would like to make or some goals they have in mind, and we may know of some referrals that could help them in those areas. This is one of the places that we can really use those open-ended questions as well, because we don't want to, again, jump in and tell a family what they should be doing. We want to be supporting them in their journey of building their own skills and building their own resiliency. So we can ask questions even when we have making referrals in mind. We can ask things like, what would you like to do in this situation? Or what are some of the steps you're thinking about taking? And we can ask, what do you know about other services in our area? Or who have you reached out for support before? That way we're kind of building on their skills in engaging their minds and thinking about problem solving. And even after that, if the family does not have any ideas or does not know about services, you can respectfully ask permission and say, would you like to hear about some resources that I know about? Just so, again, it feels very much like they are the ones in control of their situation. Now, we have to do a lot of self-care when we're home visitors, to process our own feelings. We need to know what our own stuff is, and we need to know what are those things that are going to kind of engage our stress response and trigger us a little bit. And if we can know about those ahead of time, it's helpful, because if we get thrown a little bit and we're operating from a place of our stress response, we're not going to be helpful to the families. So it's always important that you're taking care of yourself, you're processing your own feelings, you're knowing your own stuff, you're taking time to reflect on your experiences as a worker. Afterwards, you're thinking about, why did I get a little bit upset when she brought this up? Or why did I lose my train of thought during that home visit? What was going on there? It's really important that you reflect on your experiences of what's going on at work. And to do that, you need some support, right? Through supervision. And when you're a home visitor, many times you are working for a program or an agency, and you do have that supervision, and you need to be using that all the time to talk through your boundary issues and talk through the things that are triggering you. We're all human. It's not that it's a bad thing that you're having these experiences and having these feelings. We can't put our humanness aside. The important thing is just that you do process them with somebody. Um, and you have formal supports and informal supports. Informally, you might have your coworkers. You may have people in your personal life you can process things with. Of course, you want to maintain confidentiality and maybe just talk generally about situations. But your formal supports are really your supervisor. And in Healthy Families, we have a lot of reflective supervision built right into the program. Other people, you may have to identify other colleagues or people that you can use as that person that you can bounce things off of. Because just as we want to be that safe place for the parents to share their experiences, we need a safe place too where we can talk about those things. So make sure you know who that is for you. And the last thing I want to talk about as far as being a home visitor is self-regulation in the moment. And that is when you are in the middle of a home visit and a family shares something with you. They share part of their story or something they've done, and it really throws you off your game. It either shocks you or surprises you, and you feel that emotional response coming up in yourself. And you need to think of a way or come up with a way ahead of time where you can kind of calm that strong reaction you're having and return to the present with the family. So, again, sometimes you know ahead of time what your triggers are, and sometimes you don't. So, in Healthy Families, we call this mindful self regulation, and it's 3 steps. The first step is just noticing that something has gotten a strong response in you. And some people feel it in their bodies, some people feel it in their minds. And I'd like you to think for a minute how you feel it. Like when something throws you, how do you know? Where do you feel it? How do you know something's got you going? I can tell you for myself, I get my blood rushes to the top of my body, my chest and my neck and my face get flushed and red, and I can feel it. So that's my tell. That's how I know, okay, something's got me going. And you just want to acknowledge that. For some people, it's in their minds. Their minds get racing. They're thinking about what they're going to say next, or they're thinking about how they're going to solve a problem, or they're thinking about something else and they're not present. And that's their signal from their body that something has thrown them. So just kind of know what it is. So that first step is you acknowledge that something's happening in your mind or your body that has thrown you. The second step is to have a strategy that you know works for you. And this is going to be very personal to you on what works. And you want to give it some thought ahead of time because you want to be able to pull it out when you need to, when you're in the middle of that home visit. So some people, many people I hear talk about it, is just to take a couple of deep breaths and maybe just nod your head, maybe say something neutral, just like, oh, or tell me more. That kind of buys you time, keeps the parent talking, and take a couple of deep breaths and gather your thoughts and then come back to the present. Um, Other people have more specific things they do. I've heard people talk about grounding exercises. There's a system called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the first thing you do is think of 5 objects in the room that you can see. You can concretely see, and you can say, okay, I see a lamp, a book, a picture, a pillow, a couch. The fourth, then you go to 4 things you can hear. What are just 4 things that are going through your mind right now that you can hear? 3 things you can touch. It might be, okay, I can touch the skin on my other hand. I can feel the material of my pants. Two things you can smell and one thing you can taste. Now that might take a bit of a while, and you want to be able to come back into the present with the parent in just a few moments, but you might want to pick one or two of those things. And it really does quiet and focus your mind and brings you out of that stress response. So you can go back to the third step, which is just to regain being present with the family. So mindful self-regulation is just noticing that something's gotten a reaction out of you, employing a strategy that you know works for you, that you've thought about ahead of time, and then returning your attention to the family. So in a minute, we'll talk a little bit more about that. People can share some of their strategies with each other, but that's just something to really give some thought to ahead of time. So now Karen is going to talk about this from a group facilitator perspective.
Lisa, that was some really great stuff. I really appreciate all of what you just shared. There certainly are some parallels to home visiting and group facilitation for sure. So you may, in this presentation, you may see a little bit of overlap, but what that tells me is that we're both on the same page and helping to establish all of these, the importance of healthy boundaries and referrals and self-care and self-regulation and supervision. So that is good. It's working with families. And I had the privilege and have had the privilege over the last 30 years of working in groups. So let me talk a little bit about the healthy boundaries. It's interesting when I talk about, I do teach in another class. I work with a local safe house that has a program for women who have been sex trafficked. And I teach healthy boundaries at that class and that program. And when I share with the parents in my parenting classes that I teach healthy boundaries, they say, oh, let me sign up for that. I do not have healthy boundaries, and I'm well aware of that. So what I've done is that I've weaved in this information because parents are very well aware, individuals are very well aware that they really are struggling in this area of their life. So let me share with you a little bit of information that I've come across and what I use with parents. So learning to set healthy boundaries is necessary to maintain a positive self-concept or a positive self-image. So it's our way of communicating to others that we have self-respect. So when we have self-respect and we have healthy boundaries as we're working with families, then they're learning those healthy boundaries vicariously through us. So it wouldn't be possible to enjoy healthy relationships if we don't have personal boundaries or without our willingness to communicate them directly and honestly with others. We must recognize that each of us is a unique individual with distinct emotions and preferences. To set personal boundaries means to preserve your integrity, take responsibility for who you are, and take control of your life. One of the things that I've become even more aware of than ever before is that we really need to maintain our personal power. And what I mean by that is by not allowing someone else to define who we are. We need to define who we are. And by setting those boundaries is one of those ways of honoring who we are and not allowing someone else to define that. So know that you have a right to personal boundaries. Recognize that other people's needs and feelings are not more important than your own. Not to say that we're not respectful of those needs and feelings, absolutely, but being careful not to become codependent and, allowing someone else's needs and feelings to override your own. Learn to say no. That's been, something that's been promoted for a very long time, in setting those limits and saying no to an individual, and practice saying no. So you're comfortable with that. Identify the actions and behaviors that you find unacceptable. Trust and believe in yourself. When we possess healthy boundaries, we have improved self-confidence and a healthy self-concept. We are more in touch with reality. We're better able to communicate with others and have better, more fulfilling relationships, and have more stability and control over our lives. So no one can control us except for us. And knowing that that's a choice that we make, that once we have given over our sense of personal power to another person, it's a very slippery slope. And what can often happen is that you've set yourself up for a very disrespectful and abusive relationship. So making sure that you have healthy boundaries is important in this work as a group facilitator, but also teaching parents what healthy boundaries are. The next is identify supports for parents and referrals. So just remember that we are a piece of the pie. We are not the end all and be all. That there are many other professionals in these individuals and these parents' lives that can also help them in their journey as parents and self-confident individuals. We need to help parents to develop a sense of value and worth so that they can pass that on to their children. So we're not counselors. We provide support, information, and education. Recognize when you are being led into a counseling role. That can be a very slippery slope, because parents want, they want a one-stop shop, and as much as we would like to be able to provide that, that's not possible. We need to stay in our lane, which as a parenting educator, it's pretty broad. It's a pretty broad lane, but you need to be able to identify and recognize when a parent is taking you down that road of them wanting you to be their counselor. Well, can I meet with you individually? Can I, I like what you have to say. I feel safe with you. Those are all very, very endearing compliments to us, but we need to know what our place is, what our role is, and to stay in that role and not to go into, being a counselor. We're not counselors. We're not mental health professionals or psychiatrists. And we walk a very narrow, very thin line there. We need to know when it is that we're going across that line. So have a list of those professionals so that you can make a referral. So that parents know that there's others that are out there that can also help them. And if you are not familiar, I happen to be in 2 counties. One county that I'm very familiar with and the resources that are available, and the other county I'm not so familiar with. So what I do is that I'll ask the parents, when it comes to a housing issue, or it comes to any kind of services, there's a wealth of knowledge in that room. And that's, again, building that trust and that community within the group, is that, ask the group, are you familiar with any psychiatrists in the area that you feel really good with? Who are some doctors, an OBGYN, if parents are new to this community, they're not familiar with what the services are. So it's take it to the group. I love being able to step out of the role of, I don't know everything. Okay. So that when I take it to the group, then they start to take some responsibility. Then we've got self-care, so important. And what I've always said, and I've taught and done other workshops on this, is that you need to know who you are. So know thyself. So know what your triggers are on those sensitive areas of your life that you've experienced some personal trauma. Getting help for yourself and dealing with those issues is really, really important. We do not want to pass our trauma on to anyone else. That is our personal stuff. And we can certainly be empathetic with families and in some of the issues that they've dealt with, but knowing that these are issues that we've dealt with is not something that we need to pass on to them. So one of the things that I thought about as I was pulling this together is that there's nothing worse than having two people in that black hole. They're feeling really overwhelmed, and maybe this was something that really that you experienced as well, and so then you jump into that black hole with them. It's like, we need to be the encouragers. We need to be bringing hope. Have us, and it's really, really important in creating that safe environment for them. So, have a safe person who we can process with after the class. Because that's the reality, is that, there are going to be some things that are going to be triggers for us. So having healthy boundaries again, and knowing that this is not happening to me, that this is happening to them. And maybe this is something that is beyond your scope of helping them. And so referring them out to a mental health professional that would be able to help them with this. I think of, child sexual abuse is probably the biggest trigger. It is rampant in our society, unfortunately, and a lot of us have experienced sexual abuse, and so that can be very, very difficult for to bring up in the class. But it's really important to talk to parents about how to keep their children safe and how to respond appropriately. And so, if that's something that you experience and you're still dealing with, then you need to figure out and get that help that you need outside of the group, and not having the group become your therapy group. You're the one that needs to be bringing hope and encouragement to the class. So where do you get support in processing situations? So supervision and self-supervision. So having a good supervisor is a treasure and a blessing. But if you don't have it, and you need to find someone that is a safe person, that's wise, that is seasoned in this profession, that totally is a good listener, is not going to jump in and solve the problem. And listening is probably the most important thing. I know for my own personal experiences, that when I can process and move through some of the information that's been shared with me in a class, is that I will, just in me processing, that helps me to figure out, okay, this is what I need to cover, and this is what I need to do the next time I'm with these individuals. So having that safe person so you can process with. There's a lot of junk that we hear, and we need to be able to unload some of that stuff so we don't carry it around with us. It's also important to have balance in your own personal life. I personally love to exercise, and that has saved me numerous times. Just going to the gym and exercising and just getting those endorphins release is huge for me. You need to find something that works for you. That could be reading, it could be taking walks in nature, it could be going fishing. And don't just talk about it. I have a lot of friends that talk about it, say, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. You need to actually build that into your life and into your daily life. So don't wait until you're in a stressful situation and not knowing what to do, but doing it and building it into your life, so that you can maintain an evenness in your life. So you're not on this roller coaster of going up and down emotionally. So find what it is that works for you. So the self-regulation in the moment, to be honest, when I get information that throws me, I will take it to the group. And, that gives me a minute to kind of pull back a little bit and just kind of take that deep breath, like Lisa suggested, take that deep breath and think about it, and also listening to everyone else's response to that. I don't have all of the answers, but that does give me time to formulate an appropriate response. And the appropriate response may be, I'll get more information on that. I don't really know enough information to share. I'm not going to give them, information that's inaccurate. I want them to have confidence in my ability to bring good information to them and up-to-date information. So I rely a lot on the group, to be honest with you. There's a lot of knowledge and information that the parents bring to the table, and I just love that. And that's really why I love the group work that I've done, is that I'm not the expert, and that there is just so much energy and knowledge in the room. So that is how I self-regulate in the moment. I take it to the group and take a deep breath, step back, and then come back with an appropriate response.
Thank you, Karen. Those are some great suggestions for everybody. The next thing we're going to do is break out, and here, I'll read what we're going to talk about first, and then I'm going to stop sharing this so I can see you all and get you into groups. But we want you to have an opportunity in a smaller group to share your strategies. And we talked about there's 2 times when you need your strategies. There's in the moment when you're either at a home visit or doing a group where somebody says something that throws you off your game. So what are your in the moment strategies for helping yourself return to the present? And then what are your strategies that you use after the fact that help you take care of yourself and keep your balance and help you reflect on situations with some perspective after the fact? So what are the things that you do in the moment and outside of the moment? So I got us all back here together so we can see people. And it's a pretty small group. So I think I'm just going to put you into smaller groups of 3. And so you can share a little bit, maybe just for 5 or 6 minutes. So don't feel you have to share 2 strategies. If you have one great strategy that fits into one of those things, make sure you get it out there with your group. So I'm going to, let's see. I'm going to put you in, and again,
Lisa, I'm just going to jump in and pause
Yeah.
the recording here.
Okay.
And then I will hit the record button again when we come back from the breakout rooms. Does that work?
That works.
Perfect.
So there we go. So we can just have a discussion. Like I said, there's 3 or 4 of us. I don't know, is there a way that we can unmute people, Tamaya, so people can just share spontaneously?
I think everybody should be able to unmute themselves.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Yep. Perfect.
Okay.
but I don't know where everyone is. I'm only seeing Lisa and myself and Karen.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there they are. Okay, I didn't have my screen big enough. All right.
Okay. So let's see. For the people who are active, who wants to share something that they do? What's their best in the moment trick if something happens during a home visit or during a group that really throws them for a loop? Does anybody have a strategy?
I can mention something. So what we do in Tioga County is we have 2 facilitators. I do the group facilitating, like Karen had mentioned. I don't go into the home. And it's nice to have that tandem, other person, other educator in the room for those moments when your brain goes somewhere else or the group takes a turn. You know, I've done it before. I've kind of looked at the other person going, you know, like, you're up, and you get to work with the person and they know that they bring it back around for you. Full circle, if you will. We also do chatting afterwards, the co-facilitator and myself, and that really helps process it. It's fresh, it's in the moment, and then we kind of regroup for the next session next week. You know, what can we do differently, that kind of thing. I find if we wait a few days, it's not as fresh in your mind and you forget things. You know, so I think that helps get prepared for the next session next week. And then one other thing I was going to mention is I do go for walks, some self-care. I enjoy going for walks, and it's harder to do in the winter time because I don't have as much ambition or whatever. But definitely exercise, you know, keeps you sane. Tries to anyway.
Great. Thank you for sharing, Joan. How about you, Pam? Did you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Sure. When I co-facilitate, I just try to maintain composure, maybe say, tell me a little bit more about that so I can think while they're still talking, then also process with my co-facilitator after the fact, to see if we need to follow up more on it, or how can we help them, or what referrals are available, that sort of thing. But then also there were times when I would have one-on-one conversations with folks, and I would always, I think over the years, I mean, I always think that I've heard everything, but then I'll hear a news story and realize, no, I haven't heard everything. I just try to be mindful of that and meet families where they're at and be supportive and take deep breaths when I need to, and then go to my supervisor. If I feel like I need to process more, go to my supervisor.
Great. Those are some great ideas. Very important to use that supervisor. That's really neat that you both have the experience of having a co-facilitator. That's really a luxury, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yep. Karen and I have co-facilitated many classes.
That's
And
great.
I miss that. I'm in
know.
Chemung County doing it all by myself.
Yeah, well, kudos to you. Since COVID, we have not even been able to hold Parenting with Heart. I do virtual flip it and enough abuse, but I'm anxious to get back into Parenting with Heart for sure.
Good. That's glad to hear that.
Mhm.
It also helps to have 2 facilitators in case one person can't make it. You know, then you don't have to cancel the class.
Yeah.
You just keep going.
Yep.
That's a great point.
Mhm.
So we've just about come to the end of our time. What were there any questions that people had from any of the information that Karen and I shared earlier, or thoughts or comments that came to your mind?
I just had a quick question. I missed the first few minutes of it because I was in the car trying to connect. So I know it's being recorded. Is it going to be sent out through email, or do I have to go onto this website to find it? Or
Yeah, so I believe that it's going to go out to all of the registrants as a link in an email. But it will also, if that takes too long or you miss that email, it will be available on the NICEPEP website, which is nicepep.org, and I'll stick that in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And one thing I'll send to Tamaya, so when that goes out to people is we put together a list of some of the questions and prompts that people can ask families or parents to get them talking about their experiences that people suggested at the last storytelling webinar. So that's just a little one-page handout with suggested questions, and we can add that to what goes out too. Are there any other thoughts or comments or questions? I'm just going to very quickly put up Karen and my email addresses here in case something comes to mind after I put this together on the last slide. So there's Karen and my email. If any thoughts or questions come up afterwards, go ahead and reach out to us. We'd love to hear.
And Lisa, Karen, if it's all right with you, when you send me the handout, I can include your email addresses
Oh, great.
As well when I send that information out.
That sounds good. Then I don't have to leave this up. I like seeing people and having that up.
Terrific.
So I guess is there anything else you wanted to share, Karen?
No, I think I've said everything. I mean, there's always more, but yeah,
Right.
it's
Great.
good.
Well, if there's no last thoughts or questions, I guess we'll just thank everybody for being here and wish you all a good afternoon. So
Thank you. Good to see you again,
Wonderful. And
Karen.
good to see you.
take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.